The first sound wasn't a deafening explosion. It was a soft, hollow thump. Veterans often described it as almost harmless, a muted pop that seemed too gentle to belong on a battlefield. But a second later, somewhere up to 400 meters away, a 40mm grenade detonated with devastating force. Hidden behind thick jungle, inside trenches, or sheltering behind trees, enemy soldiers suddenly realized that traditional cover no longer guaranteed survival. This was the M79 grenade launcher, a weapon so effective that it earned the nickname the blooper. Yet in the jungles of Vietnam, there was nothing humorous about it. When American combat troops entered Vietnam in large numbers during the mid-1960s, they encountered a battlefield unlike any they had prepared for. Dense jungle swallowed visibility, steep hills concealed ambushes, and the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army mastered the art of fighting from hidden positions. Conventional rifles were deadly in direct firefights, but they struggled against enemies protected by bunkers, spider holes, and thick vegetation. Soldiers needed something that could strike an opponent they couldn't even see. The US military already had rifle grenades, but they were awkward, slow to deploy, and often inaccurate. Mortars could deliver devastating firepower, yet they required crews, coordination, and time. In the middle of an unexpected ambush, infantry squads needed a weapon that one soldier could carry, aim quickly, and fire with remarkable precision. The solution became one of the most recognizable weapons of the Vietnam War. Development of the M79 began during the late 1950s as the US Army searched for a lightweight launcher capable of firing a new generation of low-velocity 40mm grenades. Engineers designed a simple break-action launcher that resembled an oversized shotgun. Instead of firing bullets, it launched explosive projectiles in a high, graceful arc. This curved trajectory allowed grenadiers to hit enemies hiding behind ridges, walls, trees, and trenches, targets that ordinary rifle fire often couldn't reach. The launcher itself measured just over 28 inches long and weighed around 6 pounds unloaded, making it surprisingly manageable for infantrymen operating through Vietnam's unforgiving terrain. Its wooden stock gave it an almost sporting appearance, but appearances were deceiving. Every round carried enough explosive power to change the outcome of a firefight within seconds. Unlike traditional firearms, mastering the M79 required learning an entirely different style of shooting. Grenadiers couldn't simply point and fire, they had to judge distance, estimate elevation, and understand the grenade's curved flight path. At close range, the projectile might not even arm before impact. At longer distances, experienced operators learned to arc their shots with astonishing accuracy, dropping grenades into bunker entrances, tree lines, and defensive positions that seemed impossible to reach. This transformed the grenadier into one of the most valuable members of every rifle squad. While riflemen suppressed enemy positions, the M79 operator searched for hidden targets that others couldn't engage. A single well-placed grenade often forced defenders to abandon carefully prepared fighting positions, allowing the rest of the squad to advance. The weapon's ammunition made it even more versatile. High explosive rounds became the launcher's signature, showering fragments across a deadly radius after detonation. Smoke rounds marked landing zones or concealed troop movements. Illumination rounds turned dark jungle nights into daylight for brief moments. Buckshot cartridges effectively converted the launcher into a giant shotgun for extremely close combat. Less lethal and signaling rounds expanded its usefulness beyond direct combat, giving commanders options for nearly every tactical situation. American soldiers quickly discovered that psychological impact often matched physical destruction. The distinctive thump of an M79 launch was immediately followed by tense silence before the explosion. That short delay created anticipation, unlike conventional gunfire. Veterans from both sides later described the unsettling effect of hearing the launch without knowing exactly where the grenade would land. Sometimes the explosion arrived behind cover that had seemed completely safe only moments before. Within months of widespread deployment, the M79 became a familiar sight across Vietnam. Photographs from the war frequently show grenadiers carrying bandoliers packed with dozens of bulky 40mm rounds, each carefully selected for the mission ahead. Their role demanded calm judgment under pressure because every shot counted. Unlike automatic rifles capable of sustained fire, the launcher held only a single round. After each shot, the operator had to break open the weapon, eject the spent casing, reload, close the action, reacquire the target, and fire again. That limitation might seem like a weakness, yet in the hands of a skilled grenadier, one carefully aimed shot often accomplished what dozens of rifle rounds could not. Deep in Vietnam's jungles, where enemies vanished into dense vegetation and every trail could hide an ambush, accuracy mattered far more than volume of fire. The M79 was never intended to replace the rifle. Instead, it filled one of the most dangerous gaps on the battlefield, the space between direct gunfire and heavy supporting weapons. In doing so, it fundamentally changed how American infantry fought in Vietnam. And before long, soldiers on both sides would discover just how devastating that change could become. By 1966, the M79 had become one of the most respected weapons carried by American infantry. Nearly every rifle platoon included a dedicated grenadier, and experienced squad leaders quickly learned that placing the M79 operator in the right position could decide whether a patrol survived an ambush or became another casualty report. Vietnam was unlike the open battlefields of Europe. Thick jungle often reduced visibility to less than 50 meters. Bamboo forests blocked rifle fire. Steep hills concealed machine gun nests. Rivers, rice paddies, and tangled vegetation created countless places where enemy forces could disappear almost instantly. The Viet Cong understood this terrain better than anyone. Instead of fighting large conventional battles, they relied on ambushes. A patrol would move quietly through the jungle before suddenly being hit by automatic gunfire from hidden bunkers or spider holes dug into the earth. The attackers usually fired only briefly before melting back into the jungle. For American soldiers, finding those hidden firing positions was often more difficult than defeating them. This was exactly where the M79 proved its worth. Unlike a rifle, which required a direct line of sight, the M79 allowed soldiers to fire over obstacles. If machine gun fire erupted from behind a tree line, the grenadier could loft a 40mm grenade high into the air, dropping it directly behind the cover protecting the enemy. Even when the explosion didn't eliminate the position, it forced defenders to move, exposing them to rifle fire from the rest of the squad. Veterans frequently recalled that the M79 gave them something priceless during an ambush initiative. Instead of remaining pinned down while waiting for artillery or air support, infantry units could immediately strike back. That rapid response often disrupted carefully planned enemy attacks before they gained momentum. The psychological effect became just as important as the explosive power. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers knew that hiding behind trees, inside trenches, or beneath jungle foliage no longer guaranteed protection. Every explosion reminded them that American infantry possessed a weapon capable of reaching places ordinary bullets could not. The launcher also became extremely effective against bunker systems. Throughout South Vietnam, enemy forces constructed elaborate defensive positions using logs, packed earth, and camouflage. Many bunkers featured firing slits barely visible from outside. Direct rifle fire often bounced harmlessly off the thick protective layers. A skilled grenadier, however, could place a grenade directly into the firing slit or explode it immediately outside the entrance. Even if the structure survived, the blast and fragmentation frequently forced its defenders to abandon the position. Many infantry officers later admitted that assaults against fortified positions became far less costly once grenadiers were positioned correctly. But carrying the M79 also meant accepting serious responsibility. Unlike riflemen with magazines holding 20 rounds or more, the grenadier carried a single-shot weapon. Every trigger pull mattered. Miss the target, and precious seconds disappeared while reloading. Those seconds could feel like an eternity during close combat. Reloading required breaking open the launcher, extracting the empty casing, selecting another grenade from a bandolier, inserting it carefully into the chamber, closing the action, reacquiring the target, and firing again, all while under enemy fire. Experienced grenadiers practiced this sequence until it became instinctive. Many developed remarkable speed, yet they never sacrificed accuracy. Ammunition was heavy, and each grenade represented a valuable resource. Wasteful shooting simply wasn't an option during long patrols where resupply might be days away. Another challenge came from the grenade's minimum arming distance. Most 40mm high-explosive rounds required roughly 14 to 30 meters of flight before becoming armed. If fired too close, the projectile usually struck the target without exploding. Enemy fighters quickly recognized this limitation. Whenever possible, they attempted to close the distance, forcing American grenadiers into extremely dangerous situations where their primary weapon became almost useless. To compensate, many M79 operators carried a sidearm, usually the Colt M1911 pistol. Others relied on special buckshot cartridges that transformed the launcher into an oversized shotgun capable of devastating close-range fire. These buckshot rounds fired dozens of steel pellets in a wide pattern, making them especially effective during sudden encounters in dense jungle where visibility measured only a few steps. Although less famous than its explosive ammunition, many veterans considered buckshot one of the launcher's most valuable capabilities. Helicopter air assault operations also demonstrated the M79's versatility. As UH-1 Huey helicopters inserted troops into landing zones surrounded by jungle, grenadiers often provided immediate suppressive fire against suspected enemy positions. Smoke rounds marked safe landing areas, while high-explosive grenades discouraged enemy forces from approaching vulnerable helicopters during unloading. Even reconnaissance teams operating deep behind enemy lines depended on the launcher. Small patrols from units such as the Long-Range Reconnaissance Patrols, or LRRPs, occasionally carried M79 launchers because they delivered powerful firepower without requiring large support weapons. If discovered, a few well-placed grenades could create just enough confusion to allow the patrol to escape. By the late 1960s, the distinctive thump of the M79 had become one of the defining sounds of American operations in Vietnam. It represented far more than another weapon. It symbolized the adaptation of infantry tactics to one of the most unforgiving battlefields in modern military history. But as effective as the M79 proved to be, soldiers soon discovered that the weapon also had limitations that would eventually inspire an entirely new generation of grenade launchers and permanently change infantry combat around the world. For all of its battlefield success, the M79 was far from perfect. In fact, many of the weapon's greatest strengths also created its biggest weaknesses. As the Vietnam War continued, American soldiers learned that carrying the launcher often meant sacrificing something equally important: firepower in close combat. Unlike every rifleman around him, the grenadier carried no standard infantry rifle. His primary weapon could fire only one round before requiring a reload. If an enemy suddenly appeared only a few meters away, the M79 operator could quickly find himself at a serious disadvantage. To solve this problem, many grenadiers carried a Colt M1911 pistol strapped to their belt. Others unofficially carried compact rifles or captured enemy weapons whenever they had the chance. Some even modified their equipment depending on the mission, balancing explosive capability with personal protection. Combat in Vietnam was unpredictable. A patrol could spend hours moving through silent jungle before suddenly entering a firefight that lasted only seconds. During those moments, the ability to react immediately often determined who survived. The M79 rewarded patience and precision, but punished hesitation. Experienced operators became experts at estimating distance almost instinctively. Many could glance across a valley or jungle clearing and know almost exactly where to aim. New grenadiers often struggled with this skill, sending rounds too short or too far until experience replaced guesswork. This experience created something almost impossible to measure on paper: confidence. Squad leaders frequently trusted veteran grenadiers with tremendous responsibility because one accurate shot could completely reshape a battle. Whether destroying a hidden bunker, breaking an ambush, or forcing enemy troops to abandon defensive positions, the M79 repeatedly proved that precision could be more valuable than sheer volume of fire. Its versatility also continued expanding throughout the war. New ammunition types appeared to meet different battlefield needs. Colored smoke rounds marked helicopter landing zones and artillery targets. Star parachute flares illuminated entire sections of jungle during nighttime operations, exposing enemy movement that would otherwise remain invisible. Less lethal rounds eventually found roles in crowd control after the Vietnam War, demonstrating that the launcher was capable of much more than firing explosive ammunition. Yet military technology never stands still. As American commanders studied combat reports from Vietnam, one conclusion became increasingly clear. Infantry squads wanted the explosive capability of the M79 without giving up the firepower of a rifle. The answer arrived in the late stages of the conflict with the introduction of the M203 grenade launcher. Instead of replacing the soldier's rifle, the M203 attached directly beneath it. A single infantryman could now fire both standard rifle ammunition and 40mm grenades without switching weapons. It was a revolutionary improvement. Although many soldiers appreciated the convenience of the M203, opinions remained divided. Veterans who had mastered the M79 often argued that the older launcher offered superior accuracy. Its dedicated stock, longer barrel, and better balance made it easier to place grenades precisely at longer distances. Many believed it handled more like a finely crafted sporting shotgun than a military weapon. Even decades later, former grenadiers frequently described the M79 with remarkable affection, not because it was perfect, but because it was dependable. Mud, humidity, tropical rain, and rough handling rarely stopped it from functioning. Its simple break-action design contained few moving parts, making maintenance relatively easy under harsh battlefield conditions. In a war where equipment failure could cost lives, reliability became priceless. The M79 also left an unmistakable mark on military history. Its success influenced nearly every modern grenade launcher that followed. From the M203 to today's advanced standalone launchers used by armies around the world, the basic concept introduced by the M79 continues to shape infantry tactics more than half a century later. Today, the weapon occupies museums, military collections, and the hands of ceremonial units. Historians study it not merely as another firearm, but as a symbol of how warfare evolved during one of the 20th century's most complex conflicts. For many Americans who served in Vietnam, however, the M79 represents something far more personal. It recalls exhausting jungle patrols, tense river crossings, sudden ambushes, and the constant uncertainty of a war fought against an enemy that often remained unseen until the first shots were fired. Every scratch on its wooden stock, every dent in its steel barrel, carried the memory of another mission. The launcher's famous nickname, the blooper, came from the soft sound it made when fired. It was an oddly harmless name for a weapon capable of changing the course of a battle with a single shot. Perhaps that contradiction explains why the M79 remains so unforgettable. It never possessed the fame of the M16 rifle or the intimidating appearance of a machine gun. Instead, its reputation was earned quietly, one carefully aimed grenade at a time. Deep beneath the jungle canopy of Vietnam, where visibility was measured in meters and danger hid behind every tree, the loudest weapon was not always the one soldiers feared most. Sometimes it was the one that began with nothing more than a quiet, unmistakable